Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about books that I DNF'd or did not finish and whether or not I would give them a second chance. So usually when I DNF a book, it is a pretty good assumption that I am not going to be coming back to that book. But there are, of course, exceptions, and a lot of these exceptions are due to maybe I picked that book up when I wasn't in the mood for that type of genre, or couldn't really focus on things because something in my personal life was kind of keeping me from fully enjoying it. So there are times where maybe I just don't pick up a book at the right time, and I can recognize that and put it away for later. But I think most of my DNFs are firmly because I know I'm not going to enjoy that book. I'll try to do a nice balance of ones that I do plan on potentially giving that second chance to, and then ones I definitely don't. So let's chat about them. I'm going to open up my did not finish list on Goodreads and see what we have. Let's talk about one that I'm not going to be coming back to, and then I'll switch. So the first one is The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. Now, I do want to give this author another chance, but The Bone Ships, when I was reading it, I am not a huge seafaring fantasy person. I don't love seafaring fantasy, usually because you get a lot of descriptions of like the ship and how to maneuver the ship and like what the crew's doing and that sort of thing, where my interest is just immediately lost. Like I don't care what side of the ship you're on, what you're having to do to move the ship this way. I just don't care. So I am not a huge seafaring fantasy person. So this particular book just felt so heavy on like the nautical speak, where I just was not a fan at all of the world building and the way descriptions were written, and I just felt so bored by this book. I remember giving it like halfway, and it was a buddy read book that I was doing at Elle with the time, and I was like, Elle, can I please DNF this book, because I just was not enjoying it at all, and none of the characters were really doing it for me. None of them really stood out to me. So this is one that I'm not going to be coming back to this book, but I will be reading more books by this author, because maybe it was just their seafaring fantasy that didn't work for me, and maybe some others really well. Particularly, I have The Gods of Wordwood, which is R.J. Barker's newest release that I definitely plan on checking out, and we'll see if that one ends up working better. But yeah, The Bone Ships was one that I won't be coming back to. Now let's talk about one that maybe I would come back to. And again, if I do plan on coming back to these, it would be a while before I do so. I have to have a little bit of distance between when I DNF that book and when I would try to read it again. One that I might try to give another chance is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Fairies by Heather Fawcett. Now, this is one that I tried reading at the beginning of the year because everyone loves this book. Everyone loves this book. Everyone was talking about the coziness of it, how sweet it was, the romance, everything about, oh my gosh, I didn't see one negative review of this book, and then I picked it up. I was so bored. What? I was so bored by this book. It was like going into like the most mundane details about this character's life, and I found the main character so bland, and the writing itself, it read like a textbook, and there were footnotes that I just didn't care about. Oh my goodness, I was like, am I reading a totally different book than everyone else? Like, I don't care how this character is doing their laundry or like walking through grass. I don't care. I was so baffled by my experience and how it differed so much from everyone else's. Now, I did give this book about 100 pages before I DNF'd it. So maybe I just didn't give it long enough, but it's not a super long book to begin with. So, but this is one that I could see myself coming back to, because maybe I just wasn't in the mood at the time for this kind of book. And with how many people absolutely love this book, I'm like, I had to have been missing something. I had to have been. So that is one I could see myself trying again. I do still own it. I have the pretty Fairy Loot edition. I was so sad when I didn't like it because I was like, this is the most beautiful book. I would love to love this book because it's so pretty. But yeah, that one's one that just was not working at all for me, but I could see myself giving another chance for sure. So that one, Emily Wilde, you can stick around, you can stay. We'll see if you end up working better for me later on. Another one that I do not plan on coming back to, not at all, is The Troop by Nick Cutter. Oh my god. So this is one that I knew was going to be a difficult read. It's horror, and I had heard so much about the body horror parts of this book. Like, it was very much body horror, like weird things happening to people's bodies is what body horror means. And so I am not a super visual reader. I can read horror books. I can read the scariest horror book and be totally fine, have no problems at all reading it, but I cannot watch super scary movies. I cannot, because I am not a visual reader. I do not see things vividly in my head when I'm reading stories. So horror books actually work really well for me for that reason. And so I thought that when people were talking about the body horror in The Troop, I was like, okay, yeah, there's going to be some gross descriptions, but it won't bother me because I won't be able to like really visualize those vivid details. Nick Cutter wrote this book in a way where you cannot help but see vivid details in your head. And I have to say, that is kudos to him and his writing style for being able to really evoke the imagery and really make you visualize exactly what's going on. Ew. I really don't want to visualize any of what's going on. It was disgusting. It was the most disgusting book, and there were so many gross things happening. I don't like weird things happening to people's bodies. And I thought maybe I could read about it, and I definitely can't watch it, but maybe I could like read about it and be fine. Nope. Cannot even read it. No, absolutely not. So I learned something about myself as a reader. Stay far away from body horror. Cannot, will not do it. Absolutely not. I gave this book 100 pages, and by the 100-page mark, the weirdest, grossest stuff was happening, and I was out. I was out. No, thank you. No, absolutely not. So that is one I will definitely not be picking up again. Oh my god. All right, now let's talk about, again, one that I would come back to, House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. All right. I will admit, I did not give this book a very fair shot when I tried to read it earlier this year. I really enjoyed House of Earth and Blood, really enjoyed the first book in the Crescent City series. Loved the ending. The second book, I had heard so many bad reviews from some of my friends that I had already kind of had a bias going into it. And maybe that wasn't fair for me to have a bias going into it, because I've also heard a lot of people love this book. But you're immediately introduced to a new character that you've never met before, and I was just not feeling it. I was not feeling it at all. And then when we got past the new character's perspective and we got back to our old characters, I feel like so much time has passed now since I've read the first book that I was like, I really don't care at all about what's going on with these characters. I don't care. And it's such a big book. And I feel like the books in that series are only going to get bigger because Sarah J. Maas doesn't have an editor. I'm kidding. She probably does. But they do not edit her books nearly enough. So they're humongous books. And I'm like, do I really want to be sitting here reading this book for like over a month? Because that's how long this book would take me to read with how big it is. And I just wasn't feeling it. I just was not into it. However, that being said, I really only gave it like 60 pages, which is not a fair shot at all. And I have heard that the ending of this book is like mind-blowing. Oh my gosh, wow, can't believe it. So I do potentially see myself keeping it around, and especially when the third book comes out, if people love the third book, I can see myself trying to go back and reread the second book again to continue on with the series, knowing that maybe that second book isn't the strongest, but if I have a good enough time, then I can at least move on with other better books in the series. So if people love the third book, gets good reviews, I can see myself trying this one again. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I could potentially come back to it. Another one that I will not be trying again is going to be The 12 Kings and Cherakai by Bradley P. Bolo. This one makes me really sad because I loved the idea of this fantasy series, and I had heard so much great stuff about this fantasy series. People absolutely love it. But the way the world building was done and the exposition and descriptions, like the heavy, dense descriptions of things, just did not work for me at all. Like I remember I had tried reading this book a couple years ago and had gotten about 150 pages in and then put it down and just hadn't gotten back to it. And then I tried it again last year and then got about like 200 pages in and was like, no, I can't. And so after trying twice and kind of finding around the same spot where the book just did not work for me, I was like, no, I just don't think that the writing style and the way the world building is laid out to the reader is for me. I just really didn't like the heavy, dense descriptions, the long paragraphs, the exposition of like every little tiny thing in the world. I know a ton of readers who would absolutely love that. If you love that style of world building, if you want to know every little detail, if you want to know the exact food that's being sold at every stall in the market that you're walking through, or you want to know exactly what every sensory detail is, I think that this could really work for some readers. But it just didn't work for me, unfortunately. I was so sad. So sad. I was really hoping it would work for me. Another one I can see myself coming back to is A Desolation Called Peace by Arkady Martine. Now, this is one that I really liked, A Memory Called Empire. Really, really liked it. And unfortunately, I was not having as good of a time with the second book. Now, the first book is very, very dense. It's something that is surprising that I liked it as much as I did, because it has a very kind of more dense writing style where you have to be really focused in. It's very complex. There's a lot going on. The technology's weird. The politics are complex, but I really enjoyed it. And the world building, it's so different than our world that it takes a while to get oriented, but I really liked it for some reason. I really liked the politics. I really liked the characters. The technology that was being explored was super cool. And the second book kind of has a different focus. It has different sets of characters that you're following. And I just wasn't as into those new characters. I wasn't as into the new concepts that we were exploring. The first book is much more of like a political, like kind of murder mystery type book, where the second book is much more about like first contact with aliens type thing. And so I just wasn't as into that idea. However, I can see myself trying to come back to it because it might have been my mood. That writing style definitely requires a certain mood that you have to be in and a certain level of focus that you have to have when you're reading. And maybe that just, when I picked it up at the time, just it was not the right time at all. So this is one that I do still have on my shelves. I would like to try to reread at some point because maybe it would work better for me if I'm in a different mood. Another one that I will not go back to is going to be Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is one that I picked up because V.E. Schwab, for me, is an auto-buy author where I really will try anything that V.E. Schwab writes. This is a more middle grade young adult fantasy book that is much more focused on the atmosphere of the book and the atmosphere of what's going on rather than the plot or the characters themselves. And for me, I do not like that type of book. I really need either plot or I need characters or I need a nice balance of both. Especially in fantasy, I really want some sort of plot. And so Gallant just being so focused on like the setting and the atmosphere of what was going on, it just was not working for me. It was very slow. I was very bored. I didn't care at all about the characters. I didn't care what was going on. So yeah, this is one I'm not going to be going back to. I did give it like 100 pages and it's not very long, so I feel comfortable like not having to try that one again. But one I will try again is Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio. Empire of Silence and this Sun Eater series is so beloved by so many people. So many people love this series, and everyone talks about how amazing the sequels are. Oh my goodness. So I've just heard so many amazing things. And so when I picked up the first book, I was bored. It was so slow, and it took a long time to even get going, and you're following a character who's telling you their life story, and so you're beginning at the very, very start of their story where they're young and just starting out their journey to get to where they eventually end up, and like that beginning part of the journey was just not very intriguing to me. I recognize that the writing itself, like the prose itself, is beautiful, it's well written, but it wasn't something that I was like super into. I just did not care. But again, it could be that it was because of my mood. And maybe I just was not feeling this kind of story at the time I picked it up. I did have a lot of other stuff going on in my personal life, so maybe it was a result of that. And I have some bias towards this because I've just seen so many people love it so much, and I want to be in on that love. I want to love it as much as everyone else does. So maybe it's a little bit of just like that fear of missing out. I want to understand. I want to. And everybody does say that the sequels are even better than the first book. So maybe even if the first book is like a 3 or 3.5 star, maybe if I can get to those sequels, they will blow me away. So this is one I could see myself trying again. I still own it for that reason. So maybe I would love it. I really want to. I'll do one more of each. And so the next book that I want to talk about that I will not be trying again is going to be Steelheart by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Reckoners series, and this is one where nothing about the book was like making me mad, or I wasn't like bored by it, but I also just did not care about the characters or what was going on. And I had this feeling that there's this big mystery at the center of this book, because it's very much in a world where superheroes are a thing. It's almost like the young adult version of the TV show The Boys on Amazon, which I love The Boys. So I was very excited to check this one out. But it's a young adult version of it, and there's this mystery element to it. And after reading Cytonic, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to love the reveal of this mystery. And I'd heard other people were warning me, like, Jessie, if you don't like Cytonic, I don't know if you're going to like what the reveals are in Steelheart. So by the halfway point in this book, I just wasn't super invested. I didn't really, like, the characters were kind of grating on me a little bit. Like, I really didn't like any of them, and they had a lot of, there was this kind of like found family, like a lot of characters coming together, and I didn't like the way they were interacting with each other. There was stuff about the characters that was really bothering me. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna DNF this. And then I had someone tell me the end of the book, like what the reveal of the mystery was. And I am so glad I did not finish this book, because it would have made me so mad to have gotten to that reveal. Oh, it would have made me so mad. So yeah, I'm glad that I DNF'd this when I did. I definitely don't plan on coming back to it, especially since I know the big reveal at the end. Yeah. This was one that was just not for me. So this is like one of my only Brandon Sanderson books that I just was not a fan of, and really didn't work. And then the final book that I would give potentially another chance to is going to be Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This one is another one that is so well loved, so hyped in the community. So many people have told me in my comments to read it, and in the back of my head I'm like, I tried. So I loved An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson, and Sorcery of Thorns is very different than An Enchantment of Ravens. I have tried listening to this one on audio, and it wasn't working. And then I tried physically reading it, and it wasn't working. So I've kind of tried it twice now. The problem with it was it's this really cool concept of a character who works in this like magical library, and there's like magic involved with some of the books in the library, and you really only spend like a very short portion of the book in that kind of setting, and then it becomes what feels like a very typical YA story with like the love interest and the journey, and the main character felt very kind of YA generic to me. So I was just kind of like underwhelmed. Like once we left like the cool unique part of the book, it felt so cliche to me. It was so sad. I think people love this so much. So like maybe I just didn't give it enough of a chance. I think I've given it like 20% of the book, which I feel like is a fair shot. But maybe that wasn't enough. I don't know. So this is one that I have gotten rid of since trying to read it twice, and would potentially borrow it from the library to try it one more time. It gets one more shot. Third time, 3 strikes and you're out. Third time's the charm. Maybe. So we'll see. This is one you can convince me in the comments to try again. If you think that even though I didn't love the beginning of it, maybe I would love where it ends up going. But it just felt so generic to me. I don't know why. I've read so much YA fantasy. So if it's not doing something super unique, then it probably just won't capture me the same way. So we'll see. We'll see if you can convince me. I could be convinced to try this one again. So those are some of the books that I haven't finished, that I put down, did not finish, that I either could try again in the future or definitely don't want to try again. So did you see any here that you have any thoughts on? Let me know in the comments down below. And then what's one book that you've DNF'd that you definitely wouldn't come back to, and another book that you've DNF'd that you would try again and give that second chance to? Leave those comments down below as well. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!